So, the other day I was wondering, but hold on, today is the other day, isn't it? Today is also the other day. That's kind of a mantra. You can sit or when you're walking or sitting or doing something, and bring to your attention that little sentence. Today is also the other day. Anyway, I was wondering if I continue to talk, what happens? You know, the way I talk, there are sometimes gaps, silence. But I'm also talking when I'm not saying anything. I use the power of silence. It's a sorcerer's trick. I'm aware that the way I talk is not, let's say, compatible with many people. I can talk fast. Generally, I talk in a certain cadence, punctuated by silence. And what do I talk about? Well, all sorts of things, of course. But how longer can I continue? Am I going to continue to talk? I do wonder about this. And let me share some of my reflections with you, if you don't mind. Of course, I've said a lot already. I don't like to repeat myself, but sometimes I have to. And it's a teacher's responsibility. But there's also quite a lot I haven't said yet. And I ponder on that. I wonder where it's going to take me. Of course, every day you live is one day less to live. Even if I talk from now to the end of my life, I still wouldn't be able to say everything that I could say. Yeah, I have some more things to say, different. So, time is of the essence now. And I'd like to say things that really matter, things that really make a difference. By the way, when I say time is of the essence, I don't mean anything. I don't mean to suggest anything. I'm fine, actually. Be not concerned. I'm in good condition. No health problems. My stamina isn't what it used to be, but then my stamina used to be quite extraordinary. It's still pretty good. On the other hand, living in the AD spectrum has its perils. There's a fragility involved. I can be quite upset if I catch my fingernail on my sweater. Things like that. Fireworks. Fireworks put me into a murderous rage, a meltdown. So there are many little things that affect me in a way, perhaps, that neurotypical people don't suffer. But in the big picture, I'm quite well. On that note, let me tell you a little anecdote about myself. Now, I've not said this publicly, ever. The staff at Nemeton know about it. I think it was about a year ago. The anniversary is coming up. It was in February, I think. And, probably in March, because March is the month to do the car inspection. So I'd taken the car into town, a little Spanish village, left it there. And they inspected it and fixed it and took it to the, they worked on it and took it to the inspection. They drive it there, I don't. And they brought it back and I had to go and pick it up. So I had a taxi take me into town. It was around 6:30 in the evening. I walked into the garage of Miguel, a place I know real well. He's a reliable mechanic. Now this garage is a concrete building on the outside of town. As you stand in front of it, it has two big aluminum doors that pull up. So there are two bays in the garage, and in the back is the office. So I walked in on the right side, and that's where they work on cars over a pit, and in the left side, they have one of those machines that raises the car up so they can stand under it. So there were two workmen in there, Carlos and someone else. And I walked in, I sauntered in around 6:30 in the evening to pay for the car and drive home. And when I walked in, I noticed that there was a car over the pit, which is just on your right as you walk in to the bay. And they were working on this little car. It caught my attention because it was kind of a roadster, a sporty little car. It was low, and they had parked it over the grease pit and brought it up toward the edge of the grease pit, the front edge, and left about, I would say, not much room, 1.5 feet room, certainly under 2 feet, so that they could slip down and take the stairs leading down to the bottom so that they could get down under the car if they needed to. So I said hello to Carlos, another guy. I went back to the office, sat down with Miguel and chatted, paid him for the car, turned around to leave. And as I was leaving, picture now I'm coming toward you. You're standing in front of the garage. The bay is open, the aluminum door is horizontal. And as I was walking back out of the garage, the two mechanics were staying there discussing something about the engine of the car that they were working on. They'd taken off the hood, that little sporty vehicle, I don't know what it was. Unusual to see around these parts anyway. And so I wanted to say a word to Carlos as I was going out. So I sort of stepped over that way, and due to the fact that I do have a kind of visual impairment, it's not grave, it's not permanent, but it causes me to mistake distances and causes me to see light and dark less well than I ought to. So I just took a little step over to turn and say something to Carlos, and in a microsecond, I realized that there was nothing under my left foot. So what happened next? Can you picture that? I fell, like toward the left, and apparently I fell into that slot in the front of the car. I must have gone in like a slice of bread because I didn't hit the bumper or the front of the car with my arms or anything. I didn't hit the edge of the pit. I just fell in neatly, like I say, like you drop a slice of bread in a toaster. And at the bottom of that pit, against that wall, was a cast iron staircase, which was made of 4 steps, not aluminum, cast iron. And it was silver, but it was very greasy from all the work they do. So I fell in with my left side going down. I hit the staircase, I bounced off the staircase, hit the staircase on my left side, bounced off the staircase onto the long wall of the pit, bounced back off the long wall of the pit, and ended up slumped in the corner of the pit, more or less as if I had sat down there. My back was in the corner, and my two legs were pulled up, sort of like I had just sat down there, really. Now guess how much time that took? It's about 6 feet deep, the pit, right? And how long does it take for a 170, 180-pound man to fall, free fall, 6 feet into such a pit, bouncing off the stairs? Well, that's what I did. Now, I don't remember anything from the moment I had the sensation that there was nothing under my left foot. And I had no emotion. I didn't panic. I didn't make a sound. I just went down. And as I say, can you visualize how that happened without flailing my arms or without, say, hitting the back of my head on the edge of the pit or hitting my face on the bumper of the car when I went down, but I didn't hit on anything. And according to Carlos, I talked to him about this later, it took, half a second, whatever. And after half a second, I opened my eyes, and there I was sitting in the corner of the grease pit. And I looked down. In front of me, there were my Ray-Bans. And I saw that my Ray-Bans were folded. It was as if I had taken them and folded them back, as you normally do, and just set them on the floor of the grease pit. So, without hesitation, the moment I opened my eyes, and Carlos later said that I opened my eyes a second after I hit the floor. Opened my eyes and I looked at my Ray-Bans. I leaned forward, picked them up, put them on. I reached out for the cast iron stairs to lift myself up. I stood up, I climbed up the stairs, and stepped out onto the floor of the garage. Well, Carlos and his friend were standing there about 5 feet away from me. Now, I'll never forget the look in their eyes. They were almost crying, and yet their eyes were gleaming with a certain kind of delight. It was uncanny. They were beaming at me with teary eyes. And I looked down at my hands, and I saw that they had some black on them. And Carlos said, well, you can go and wash your hands. I didn't know there was a bathroom back there. So I walked back to the other corner of the garage where the office is. I went in. He followed me in. And I stood there. I stood at the little sink. I washed my hands with water and a paper towel, cleaned them off. A couple of times I looked over my right shoulder at Carlos and I nodded. I didn't say anything. I nodded. He's standing there looking at me. And then I turned around and walked out of the garage. I said, hasta luego. I got in the car and I drove home. So, you see, I'm doing pretty well. And something's keeping me alive and well. So I want you to know that. And the same is true for you. And I wish that you would know what it is. So yeah, I have no concern about imminent death. Of course, any one of us could die at any moment on any day. When I think about what to say next, if I'm going to continue to talk, my mind ranges over a number of things. For instance, recently, I put this poem on this channel. It contains a caveat, and now I'm going to add another caveat. In the first place, it was unusual for me to do that. You see, I never impose poetry on anyone. I never ask them to read the poetry I write, and I do not read it to them without being asked. And even sometimes when I'm invited to read it to them, I don't. I'm extremely discreet with my poetry for a couple of reasons. One is because I know a lot of people don't like poetry. And of course, if you don't like it, don't listen. Some people can't listen to poetry. They don't have the ability. They lack the auditory skill it takes, because listening to poetry is not like listening to ordinary language, especially the poetry I write. So, there's a saying, comes from the Diamond Sky Dakinis. It's a saying, one of the 3 instructions of Kala Tantra, and that is, disposition is the mother of intent. So if someone doesn't have the disposition to do something, like taking a canoe and rowing on a lake, then they don't do it, because they will never have the intention, because disposition is the mother of intent. So one of the rules I live by, if you can call it that, is that I never persuade anyone to do anything, or think or say anything, or consider anything. I don't like persuading. I don't like to be persuaded, and I never persuade anyone to do anything. You know, a lot of life, a lot of the drama, interpersonal drama you see in the world, consists of people trying to persuade others to do things. I really detest that. A free person doesn't act that way. So, regarding this portrait, I have my personal reasons for putting it on the internet. In fact, I'm quite involved in some poetic works right now. Some of them were written 20 years or so ago. And I want to pull them together and tie them up in a package so that I can put them in sort of a time capsule, you see. I'm doing that with a number of things, quite a few things, because I do have on my table far too many things to complete, even if I had, you know, another 20 years to live, and I don't think I want to live 20 more years. So, you know, my age adds to 13, so you can figure it out. Is it 58? Is it 67? Or is it 76, you say? But age doesn't really matter in some ways. And it is a bitch, though. I will say, age is a bitch. Death is a piece of cake. Death is like apple crumble with fresh cream. You know, there's a line from Lorca's poems. I wish I could quote it in Spanish. I have to learn how to quote it in the original, but it goes like this. It's in one of his surrealistic poems where he says, "Hey, that's not death. It's only a fruit stand." I like that line. So death is no problem for me, but aging is a trial. Age is a bitch, and I don't particularly like it. And I can't say that I found a way to age graciously. But who knows? Maybe I have. It's not for me to say. Anyway, to get to the point of this talk, it's already 20 fucking minutes. Let me say this. I've assumed many roles in life, and I've undertaken many projects. And sometimes I ask myself, you know, I did ask myself just the other day, right? Sometimes I ask myself, Well, what is my preeminent role? You know, astrologer, screenwriter, visionary teacher, navigator, star-watching teacher, poet, whatever. There's a bunch of others as well. Jack of all trades and master of none? No, I would say jack of all trades and master of one. So I would say that my preeminent role is the Terton, that is to say, the treasure finder. And I've found some treasures. I've found quite a few. Most of them on my own, but I've also had the great, great pleasure of finding some treasures with someone else, with a partner, a counterpart, although the black swan has no match. Did you know that? That expression, black swan, is kind of a popular meme, isn't it? What does it mean? I think the accepted meaning is some kind of singularity, some kind of unprecedented event that changes everything. Well, that's your life, you see. But the black swan in the tantric sense is different. It's known that swans mate for life, but the black swan has no match. So there's a little glimpse into my mind, into how I see myself, and how I feel about what I'm doing. I've been living in relative isolation since 2003, when I moved to Gaucin in the Serranía de Ronda in Spain. Now, during that time, I traveled a little bit. I've been to Sweden a couple of times to see my gang there, my Swedish team. That was glorious. And some people came through from the world of the Shaktas to visit me, but of course, that hasn't been the case over the last 2 or 3 years. So I live in relative isolation. And although I would like to talk live to people, the circumstances at the moment do not permit me to do that. So I stand here in front of this machine and record my voice in virtual. So you're not hearing my voice, you're hearing a recording of my voice. And I'll continue to do that. I'll continue with She Stays the Night, because there are more stanzas. And maybe I'll talk now and then about poetry and what it is and how important it is in life. There's a course on poetry, Course 7, Poetic Craft in Nematta. You can go to the landing page and read it and hear a couple of recorded talks there without even joining as a visitor to Nematta, if you have the disposition to be interested in poetry. It really is a tool for honing your emotions and your mind, if you know how to use it in the right way. As for what else I'll talk about, well, I'll just leave you with a little amusing remark. I'll always talk about the archons and the psyop that's currently unfolding in the world. There have been many psyops, of course. I'll always talk about the psychopaths and the enemies of life. But there's one name that I won't mention. I don't say that name anymore. Perhaps you've noticed. You might take an example out of that. It's more powerful when you fully know it, when you fully know the subject. It's more powerful not to say the name. Don't need to say it anymore. It's not necessary. You know, there is a cabal, there is an evil cult operating in the world that originated with the Sabbatean heresy in 1666. And one of the characteristics of that cult is that they had a psychotic breakdown at that time. Even the main historian who wrote a huge book about it, Sabbatai Zve, says that the leader of the cult was a paranoid schizophrenic, and all the people who were involved in that cult, which has a strong ethnic bearing, as you know, underwent a certain psychosis. They had been waiting centuries, according to their holy scriptures, for their Messiah to come, you see. And finally, when it was announced that he came in 1666, they all went for it, and then it turned out to be a bust. And so they had a breakdown. And how did they recover from that breakdown? Well, the leading ideologues and religious teachers of that cult said, okay, well, we were selected by God in the beginning to play a special role in the world, ultimately to dominate everyone else. And we were waiting for the Messiah in order to complete that mission, but now we see that the Messiah is never going to come. So we're going to be the Messiah, we as a people. And beyond that, since God disappointed us so much, our Father God disappointed us with this fiasco of Sabbatai Zve, well, we've decided that we ourselves must be God. We're not just selected by God for a special role. We are the presence of God on earth. This is how that drama actually played out, and they actually believe this, of course. Well, here's the takeaway. They have a rule in that cult, the cult of the Tzaddikim, in its current day iteration, that goes back to the beginning, and that was, you cannot say the name of God, the Tetragrammaton. Cannot pronounce it. One of the things that created a big scandal in the time of Sabbatai Zve is that he did say that name of God openly in public, and he broke an enormous taboo. But the old rule says that the people who observe the demented archontic Father God must never say in their language openly the name of that God. And so I say to you, don't say their name. Observe their rule. Observe their rule, but apply it to themselves. You don't ever have to say their name. That's a tactic. You can call it the Matangi trick. And that's a good way to change the game once and for all. Enough said, and I'll be seeing you in the beauty to come.